So I recently returned from my annual retreat in Montana, where I gather with 6 men who I went to seminary with. I've been praying with these 6 guys for 25 years. Once a month, we talk on phone. Now we meet on Zoom for an hour and a half, and we pray together. And then each year we go to Montana to get together to review our lives, right? To wrestle with our callings, to confess and be absolved, to pray, to grow together in the Spirit. And this retreat is one of the most essential rhythms in my life. Some of you know one of these prayer partners, the Reverend Joseph Constant, rector of St. John's in Beltsville, Maryland. But you would know him because he is the founder of the Haiti Micah Project, which is a project that we've sponsored here for many, many years. And Joseph asked me to thank you from the bottom of his heart for all that this parish has done for the orphans they support in Haiti. And especially right now in the midst of increasing chaos in the country of Haiti. If you've been following the service and outreach letters that come out monthly, if you don't know what I'm talking about, see me, because we send those out monthly. If you've been following those, you may be familiar with the heroics that saved 16 children from marauding gangs that overran Maribelis, the town where the Haiti Micah Project is situated. And it forced these 16 children into the woods and into a significant 35-mile trek to safety in a town north called Hanchi. And many people were killed in Maribelis, including 2 nuns in a convent 2 houses down from where Joseph's mother lives. And that place, that convent, was sacred ground for the Constant family. Joseph's grandfather once served there as a caretaker. His grandmother was a cook and a housekeeper there. And Joseph grew up in the shadow of that convent in relationship with those nuns. Now, on Sunday night, March 30th, gangs arrived in Maribelis from Port-au-Prince, and they laid siege to that city. And as the children from the Haiti Micah orphanage fled into the woods, Joseph's mother and another young man found themselves pinned down in her house. She called Joseph, right? A call no one ever wants to receive from their mother. She told him what was going on. Can you imagine that? And Joseph did what I would do. He did what I know you would do. He started working the phones. He called ambassadors from other Caribbean countries that he knew. He called the mayor of Port-au-Prince, who he knew. Joseph is not without connections and influence in the country of Haiti. He was trying to figure out who knew who within that network of gangs that might be able to get them to pause, or at least to get them to create a safe corridor so his mother could get out. But all the doors remained closed and locked. Time passed. Mrs. Constant ran out of food. She started to carefully ration water. But she and the young man who stayed there with her, they stayed put as the fighting was raging around them. Joseph did what you would do. He did what I would do. He got down on his knees and he prayed. And Sunday ran into Monday, and then into Tuesday. And on Wednesday, the inevitable happened. A gang broke down the door of Mrs. Constant's house. And they forced the young man and Joseph's mother out into the courtyard. They threw her to the ground. They forced the young man to his knees and they put a gun to his head. And then they tore through the house and they tore through her belongings and they took what they wanted, and Mrs. Constant prayed. Then, as if from beyond, a voice broke through, saying to Joseph's mother, "Mama, we did not come to kill you." And they left just like that. Mrs. Constant grabbed her green card and her passport, and she and the young man, they fled into the woods. And as they went into the woods, she used the very last bars of her telephone to dial her son to let him know what was going on. And all he heard before her phone died was, "I'm out." Joseph's mom was weak and battered from the encounter, but the young man supported her as they escaped out of town. Now, after time, as the adrenaline subsided and exhaustion set in, a man appeared. And even in the dark of night, a flash of light seemed to ignite when he saw Mrs. Constant, and he cried out, "Mama, it's me. You fed me." He was one of the 600 children fed every single day at the Haiti Micah Project, a project that you support. And he said to her, he said, "Come with me." And he helped carry her through the woods. And eventually they get through the woods, these two young men helping carrying Mrs. Constant. They get through the woods, and as they get up onto this road, they see a lone motorcycle coming down that deserted trail. And when he saw them, he slowed down and he pulled up, lifting his visor, beaming when he saw Mrs. Constant. And he said, "Mama, it's me. You fed me." Another young man who had been cared for through the Haiti Micah Project. And he said to her, he said, "I will take you to safety. I promise I will take you to safety." And he put her on the back of his motorcycle. And he drove her 35 miles to Henshi. And there he took her to the university, where there are two more young men, college students, financially supported by the Haiti Micah Project, who were there. And they embraced her and they picked her up and they took her to the hospital and they cared for her and they brought her into their own home and they called Joseph. He had prayed, God had provided. She was safe. So last Sunday, Joseph flew to Cape Haitian because he couldn't fly into Port-au-Prince, because Port-au-Prince remains closed because of the chaos in that city. And a priest whom Joseph had mentored and supported for years picked up his mother in Henshi, and he brought her to another priest's home in Cape Haitian. Joseph knows a lot of priests who he has cared for and mentored over the years. He is a man of spiritual significance in that country. And Joseph flew in. And he was picked up at the airport, and he was taken to this priest's home where he was reunited with his mother. And then Joseph brought her back to her home in Florida on Monday, safe, alive, his mother, but also a mother to many. A mother we honor today on Mother's Day. And as I reflect on this harrowing journey, and the power of our God to work through community, I am mindful of the weak-willed ways in which the powerful of this country have treated Haitian immigrants. And what I find so shameful is their rhetoric used against people who are lawfully in this country, and their lack of insight into the strength and courage it took for many of them to get here. Because that is the American story, right? That's our story. We are a nation of immigrants. That's the story of my family. My family immigrated to this country. right? It's a story of my children's family who have an even greater legacy of courage and strength with their ancestors surviving the bowels of slave ships. It is so historically dishonest for many to forget their own histories. It is cowardly to ignore the reality of the strength and courage it takes to make one's way to this country. It so diminishes the American dream. The American dream that inspired people to come here, to fill in the space created by this great country, not perfectly, but authentically, for people to express their God-given gifts in a way that benefits both them, and that's good, but also in the broadest sense, to feed their neighbors. You with me? So here's an interesting statistic. Between 1901 and 2023, the United States of America had 400 Nobel Prize winners. Way to go, America. And it turns out 100 of those Nobel Prize winners were foreign born. Here's another interesting fact. Of the remaining 300 Nobel Prize winners, 100% of them had relatives who immigrated to this country. Go figure. You never know who's going to show up in this nation and have a grandson who grows up to be the first American pope. Go figure. Leo XIV's grandfather, Joseph Martinez, immigrated to this country from Haiti. How is it that a powerful nation with vast resources forgets its history? How do we forget the benefit to us of being kind and generous? And how is it that the poorest nation in our hemisphere produces 4 young men who, in a moment of crisis, meet a woman who had saved their lives, and they put their life on the line for her? Would that happen here? I wonder. But it did happen in Haiti because Joseph's mother cared for her neighbors, kind and generous. She knew who they were, and even when she didn't know who they were, when they showed up on her doorstep looking for something to eat, she fed them. Which is why her son Joseph started the Haiti Micah Project, because his mom called him up and said, there are children here that we need to feed. And a few of them started to come, and in short order, it grew to a feeding program of 600 children every single day. And this is work that you all, we here at Epiphany, have been supporting. And when Joseph's mother's life was in danger, and she was out in the woods running for her life, it was those very children that she had fed that literally carried her, picked her up, and carried her to safety. And so I wonder, who would we meet in the woods if we were running for our life? Who would stop at the side of the road and say, Mama, it's me? Who have we fed? Maybe this story from Haiti holds up a mirror so we can see who we are. Maybe this story from Haiti sketches a picture of who is really great versus who just thinks they're really great. As followers of Jesus, we get very consistent, very clear message on what greatness is. And we find that this morning in the book of Acts. Tabitha. Tabitha was devoted to good works and acts of charity. Tabitha was the mama to those early Christian communities. She was a role model for what resurrection living, what resurrection hope looks like. Resurrection is not just about somebody rising from the dead, although that's a big deal. Resurrection is rising up communities of love, communities of impact, communities of significance, even in the darkest, in the darkest and difficult times. That's what the community does, right? That's resurrection living. And so I wonder, who are we? Who are we, Epiphany? Who are we as a people, as a church, as a community, as a nation, as a choir? I know who the choir is. Right? Who are we lifting up? Who are we welcoming and embracing? Who are we feeding? When we see the witness of a woman like Mrs. Constant, who had every reason and every resource to permanently settle in the United States of America, instead, she remained in Haiti. She let that be her home. Instead, she chose to feed the children who showed up at her door, and they remembered. And so on this Mother's Day, let's all of us remember as well. Or let's remember the mothers who fed us, who shaped us, who prayed for us, who taught us to pray. And today in particular, let us remember the greatness of the mothers who have made their way to this country, which would include every single one of our mothers back through the generations.